Okay, first of all, in this webinar, we'll be looking into load balancers. So we'll learn what is load balancers. And once we learn that, I'll be showing you two demos. So there are totally three load balancers, and I'll be showing demos of two: classic and application load balancer. So I hope you guys have an AWS account, because we'll not be going to that level of basic in this session. So in this session, we'll directly go ahead with creating a load balancer and how to integrate EC2 instances with it. So if you don't have an AWS account, not a problem. I'll just brief you through it before moving on with the demos. I'll just brief you through it. You can start practicing it tomorrow. Okay. So now let's start off with the theory of the session. Okay, first of all, load balancer. So let's look into the introduction. So in AWS, a load balancer is called an ELB, which is an elastic load balancer. So first of all, what is a load balancer? So from the word itself, from the name load balancer, I think if you know a little bit of how servers work, you can get it. So basically, a load balancer is a service which is used to distribute network traffic and workloads across multiple servers or cluster of servers. So let's say a huge company, let's say Netflix, so they do video streaming, right? So a company like Netflix, they have hundreds of thousands of television series and movies on them. So at every given minute, there are thousands of users watching something or streaming something. So for them to do that, they need a lot of servers, right? So they need a lot of space. So they'll be storing the uh, data somewhere, and these servers should be able to take it and stream it within the given time. So if you don't want to see any lag, so that's what they want to. So whenever you stream in Netflix, they don't take that much data. So basically their code is that well as they have a load balancer somewhere, because Netflix is completely on AWS. So you're giving an application. So let's say you're giving an request in Netflix. So you want to watch a series. So you click on the video. So it goes in. It takes some time to load. Then it starts loading. So at the same time, there may be thousands of users trying to access from the same location. So what the ELB does is it will. So basically, Netflix will have a lot of servers, right? So load balancer will distribute the traffic across each of those servers. So for example, let's say there are 10 servers and there are 1,000 users. So what the load balancer will do, it will either distribute 10 to each server, or if there is any other integrated material, any script written within it, so then it might distribute it in a different way. For example, the first server, whenever it reaches 80% of the utilization, then the load balancer will start distributing traffic to the next server, and so 80%, then again next server, then if it comes up to 80% again in the next server as well, then it provides, so that the usage of servers at the same time is very less. So this is the basic information about load balancers you need to know. So the simplest form to remember is it distributes traffic across servers so that you can balance and you can run your application without any disruption or crashing. So load balancer increases the availability and fault tolerance of an application. So availability in the sense, if let's say you're paying for Netflix, and at some day suddenly for a whole day if Netflix is not available, then it's not worth your money. So that application should always be available, and that's what that company should be making sure of. So to do that, you can use a load balancer, and a load balancer will always give you the best possible outcome. So that's what we can do with elastic load balancers. Okay, so we'll go to the next slide. So ELB, again, I'll be explaining this. Okay, again, Elastic Load Balancer is a load balancing service for AWS deployments. So as I told you, there are load balancers, and Elastic Load Balancer is the load balancing service provided by AWS. So there is an, are we talking about only on AWS for any cloud environment? So you can use AWS load balancer so you can only create it on AWS, but you can integrate it with other cloud services as well. So let's say you have your servers on Azure, then you can get the IP address from that Azure, then you can use that on ELB as well. So ELB scales the load balancer in the sense, so let's say you create an elastic load balancer. So once you create that, there might be any number of servers behind it, it doesn't care. So the only thing ELB knows is whenever there are a lot of connections, it automatically scales the number of connections coming in. So it'll automatically scale it up. So that's what AWS or any cloud provider gives for you. So the best thing why you're using cloud is, so if you're using an on-premise solution, then that will be a problem, because sometimes, so incoming traffic is distributed across EC2 instances in multiple availability zones. So availability zones in the sense, so let's say you take up a region. So let's consider, most of us are in India. There may be other students as well. So first of all, let's just consider any state. So I'll just say the state I know. So I'm in Karnataka. So I'll take up Karnataka. So in Bangalore, so I'm taking up Karnataka. My servers are going to be in Karnataka, but in Karnataka there are many districts. So there I can take up Bangalore, I can take up Mangalore, then I can take up Mysore, I can take Belgaum. So let's say there are 4 different availability zones in which there are AWS data centers, but actually there are no data centers in this region. I'm just taking it as an example. So there are 4 different availability zones. So that's what they're trying to mean. You can distribute traffic across all 4 of these regions, not just to one particular region. So there are 4 data centers in the same place, but there will be instances in all of these 4 availability zones which are totally different, but you can use a single ELB to distribute the incoming traffic to any one of the availability zone possible. So that's what they mean here. And then load balancer is the single point of contact for clients. So once you have set up an ELB, nobody is going to directly enter your instance. Any request coming, so for example, intellipaat.com, if you type in intellipaat.com and we have an ELB, so when you type in intellipaat.com, you will not be, so it will not be directly redirected to the particular server. You will be redirected to the DNS name of the ELB. So DNS name in the sense, the ELB will also have an URL. So you will be redirected to that URL. So from ELB, you will be redirected to the server. So that is the only point of contact, and this makes it much easier. So ELB is basically a software. Yeah. So yeah, to be simple, yeah, it is a kind of software, but so it is hosted in the AWS data centers. So when you create an ELB, it creates a provision in the AWS data center. So any contact going in, it goes to that point first, and it will automatically redistribute the traffic to the other servers. So then now types of ELB, somebody asked it. So now we'll look into the types. There are mainly 3 types of load balancers in AWS, not all the cloud providers. In AWS, there are 3 types. One is the classic, and the classic is going to be deprecated very soon. So I won't suggest using classic, but I'll still show a simple demo on how classic load balancers works. So this resembles the traditional load balancing. So this is how it was usually done, but this is not the best way to do load balancing. And then network load balancers, this is used for handling sudden and violent site traffic. Also, network load balancers are technically, you'll be routing traffic to a particular port number rather than an server. And in application load balancer, the incoming traffic type and directs it to that specific source. So application load balancer, for example, so this is what we'll be looking into in depth. So an application load balancer is nothing but you can use for an application. So again, I'm coming to the same example. So there is intellipaat.com. So we have a blog and a tutorial. Identifies the incoming traffic type and directs it to the specific source. So first of all, let's say there is intellipaat.com and we have a blog and a tutorial page. So the blog page is intellipaat.com/blog, and the tutorial page's URL is intellipaat.com/tutorial. So now the blog's website and the tutorials website can be hosted in 2 different servers. So now to basically analyze this, so let's say if you want to open the blog site, you're going to type in intellipaat.com/blog. If you want to go to the tutorial, you're going to type in again intellipaat.com/tutorial. You won't know that both of these requests are going to the same load balancer, which is the application load balancer. And in application load balancer, you would have fed the let's say the rules. So whenever it is typed as intellipaat.com/blog, so when it finds /blog over there, it will redirect you to the server in which the blog is. If it is /tutorial, it will redirect you to the server in which the tutorial website is. It's that simple. Okay, now I'll answer these questions. ELB is AWS service. Yes, it is AWS ELB. For load balancer, AWS will manage everything, right? Yes, AWS manages every single thing. You just have to create it. do we need to install in all availability zone or any one of the availability zone? That is totally your wish. So you can create an available, so sorry, you can just have servers in one availability zone or in multiple availability zones. That, while showing the demo, I think you'll understand that better. So I think you understood the difference between these three load balancers. Classic is the traditional way. I'll that will be more understandable when you check out the demo. Network load balancers is for particular port numbers, and application load balancer is for uh, a path or a HTTP header. Okay, so now I'll give more details about this. So, okay, you can see here classic load balancer. So availability zone A, availability zone B, there are two availability zones, and here there are some instances and there are some instances over here. So whenever you type in the URL, if you're using a classic load balancer and you're typing in the URL of the classic load balancer, so it'll take you to either zone A or zone, sorry, not zone A, it'll take you to the instance in zone A or one of the instances in zone B. There is no let's say there is no particular way of doing this, because whenever you refresh it, it'll take you to a different server, or you might be in the same server. There is no particular way of way how classic load balancer works. So it's basically the traditional way. So let's say you have 10 servers. So when the first time you refresh, it might take you to 3. Second time you refresh, it might take you to 4. So that is totally random. Distributes incoming traffic across EC2 instances in multiple AZs. So yeah, you can configure it across multiple availability zones. Routes traffic to healthy instances only. For example, you have connected 10 instances to it, that is 10 servers to it, and suddenly once the server has stopped working, then ELB will automatically know this server is not working. So whenever you refresh, it will not take you to that server. Okay, internet and internal facing load balancer. So basically, internet in the sense it is available for the public. That is, if I give you the URL to the load balancer, you will also be able to see the website which is hosted using that. If it is an internal facing load balancer, you will be configuring it to a particular VPC. So VPC is basically, you can see it over here. So VPC is a private cloud or a particular part inside of AWS that only that AWS account holder or people under that AWS account can access. So public will not be able to access that particular load balancer, because you can only access that load balancer from within the VPC itself. So we'll not be going into the concepts of VPC. In this session, we'll be looking into load balancers and load balancers only. So okay, so we've seen classic load balancer. So it'll basically route you to a random server every time, like round robin. Okay, now network load balancers. So this will take you to a particular server, but it's not the case every time. So let's say you have 4 different servers running port number 80, and you have 4 different servers running port number 400. There are other servers running port number 500. So there are different port numbers. So every time a port number is typed on the URL, you should be redirected to the particular server in which a web server is running on that particular port number. So in that case, you can go with network load balancers, and it can handle millions of requests per second and maintain low latency. Ideal for load balancing TCP traffic, as told, mostly HTTP and HTTPS traffic, and also supports elastic and static IP. So elastic IP or static IP in the sense. So while creating a server, you will associate it with an IP address. So in AWS, if you do not give it an elastic IP address, then whenever you reboot the server, it might have a different public IP address, because it might be launched in a different server altogether. So if you are associating it with an elastic IP address, even if you reboot the server, the IP address will not change, it will remain the same. So that you can use that IP address to associate it with the network load balancer. So the basic point I'm making here is network load balancers are mainly used for TCP traffic, that is mostly HTTP or HTTPS, and you can route it to particular port numbers. Next is an application load balancer. So this identifies the incoming resource type and directs it to it. So how does it identify the incoming resource type? You're going to mention that in the rules. So once you mention that in the rules, whenever there is a request coming in, it will check against that rules. If any one of the rules is qualified or is true, it will redirect the request to the server which is qualified under that rule. So that we'll see as a demo. Okay, so these are the three different types. Cross zone load balancing. Okay, we'll look into this. So cross zone load balancing in this sense, as I told you, there are availability zones. You can also redirect across availability zones, I told you. So here there's one availability zone and two this is US East 1, which is basically in the North Virginia region in AWS. So US East 1A and US East 1B are two of the availability zones available in the North Virginia region. So in North Virginia there are 6 different availability zones. So let's say in the region, sorry, in the availability zone A, you have a load balancer and you have instances in availability zone A and availability zone B as well. You can use the load balancer in availability zone A to redirect traffic to the servers in the availability zone A as well as B. So it automatically happens. You don't need to mention anything. While creating the load balancer, you have to just enable cross zone load balancing. So by default, CLB nodes distributes traffic to only instances in its availability zone only. So basically what they mean is, if you don't check that box for cross zone load balancing and you're using a classic load balancer, it will only use the server in a particular availability zone, and enable cross-zone load balancing to route evenly across EC2 instances. So if you want cross-zone load balancing to occur across availability zones, then you will have to enable that option while creating the load balancer, and routes each request to the instance with the smallest load. So basically this means, let's say there are 3 servers with web servers running. The first server is utilized around 20%, second server is 50%, and third server is 80%. So it will route it to the lowest performing server, that is the 20% server. So this is random. So there is no particular algorithm to follow for this. So it's the same thing with classic load balancer. Okay, so we've finished the theory part. Okay, so I'll start off with the demo, guys. I'll open the dashboard. So this is how it looks once you're logged in. Okay, so if you don't have an AWS account, guys, so it's pretty simple. AWS free account, just you can type anything you want over here. One second, I'll just minimize this. So you can go into any aws.amazon.com. You can just type this URL and then sign into the console. I'm already signed in. So if you don't have an account, you can click here. It will take you to a portal where you can create an account like how you normally do. So once you've created the account, it will ask you for your debit or credit details. So once you've given the debit or credit details, it'll take, if you're from India, it'll take 2 rupees from your account. If you're from other countries, I don't know what is the exact like the amount it'll take, and it'll be credited back to your account after 3 days. So you don't need to worry about that. We talk about service responsibility in model in AWS, maintaining ELB, access, etc. All responsibility with AWS or customer has in it. Now we'll start with this. So I showed you how to do, like I gave you a brief info about how to start off with AWS. Just give your details, get your AWS account. It is free for 12 months, so you can do that. It's free for 12 months in the sense, not all services, certain services with certain limits. Okay, so to start off with load balancers, you will have to open the EC2 service, which is called Elastic Compute Cloud. So Elastic Compute Cloud is the service in which you can create servers. So you can create servers for an Windows operating system or a Linux operating system. So this is how the basic dashboard looks, and you can launch instances directly from here. And in this session, we'll be looking into load balancers and target groups. So this is where we'll be concentrating. But to start off with load balancers, obviously you need servers. So first, let me show you how to launch few servers. And once we launch these servers, then we'll start about it. Okay, so I'll click on launch instance. So first of all, you will have to select an AMI. An AMI is basically, to be very simple to you, an AMI is like an operating system. So let's say you can have a Linux system, you can have a Windows system in your laptop, you can have a dual boot. So the same thing, an AMI is like an operating system, but here an AMI is called Amazon Mission Images, and using Amazon Mission Images, you can choose what type of an operating system your server should have. So you can see Amazon Linux 2 is Amazon's own Linux server. Coming down, there is Red Hat, there is SUSE, there is Ubuntu, there is Microsoft Windows Server, and there are particular AMIs like deep learning AMI, and again there are multiple variations in Microsoft. Yeah, so there are many types. Even there is Ubuntu Server 20.04, and make sure you select AMI which is free tier eligible, or you will be billed. So for practice, choose an AMI which is free tier. So I'm going to choose Ubuntu 18.04. So I'm going to select it. So once selected, you will be given a list of instance types. So instance type, in the sense, you will be able to see the virtual CPUs and the memory, that is the RAM. So the only free tier eligible instance type is T2.micro, which provides you one virtual CPU and 1 GB of RAM. So that is more than enough for practice, guys. There are huge instances as well. So these are some of the smaller instances. There are really huge instances, and they'll cost you a lot. So don't directly launch any huge server and get billed. So start off with T2.micro, learn how AWS pricing works, and then move ahead if you want to launch bigger servers, bigger instances. Next, so we are going to launch two servers. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to launch one in 1A, and the next server, when I launch, I'll be launching it in 1B, so that I can show you that it works across availability zones. So now next, adding storage. So for Ubuntu, 8 GB is more than enough, so I'm not going to change the size. Let it be 8 GB. So tags, in tags you can basically enter the value. So for example, name, and value is going to be web server. So a tag, when you use tags, it will be very easy to let's say you have hundreds of servers in your AWS console, and you want to take up only the web servers, and you have given the name and value as name and web server. Then it's pretty easy. In the search tab, you can just type in web server, hit enter, it will give you all the servers which has the tag web server. Next is configure security group. So this is one of the important part. So SSH, this is used to log into the instance using an SSH protocol. So I'll be showing you how to log in as well. And then we'll have to add a rule for HTTP, because we'll be launching an Apache 2 web server, which will be running on the port number 80. So we'll be doing that, and so that's how we'll be using a web server on our server, so that we can load balance it. So we'll be adding these two, SSH and HTTP, and you don't need to give any particular IP addresses, because it should be accessible from the internet. Review, and you can just review it once if you want to, then hit launch. Then if you have an existing key pair, you can select one from here. If you do not have one, you can click on create a new key pair, enter the key pair name, download the key pair, and then once you download it, you can start using it. So right now I'm just going to choose an existing key pair. So you might ask, what is a key pair? So basically, when you launch an instance, so you can see public key and private key. So the public key will be in the instance, and you will download the private key. So whenever you are logging into your instance, you will use the private key to decrypt the public key, and once that is successful, the instance will be automatically launched. So the decryption process happens in the background. You will just have to upload the private key whenever you are logging into your instance. So I have an instance over here. Sorry, not an instance. I have a key pair over here, which is in my laptop. So I'm just going to choose that and launch this particular instance. And then coming down, view instances. So right now, guys, I've launched one instance. So currently it will be in a pending state once it's running. So within this time, let's create one more in a different availability zone. So I'm not going to explain this again. So I'm just going to do a speed run. So here I'm going to choose another availability zone. So I'm going to give the same tag. So I don't know what I gave, so I'll just give the same. I think I gave a capital N. Security group, same. HTTP, review and launch. You can use the same key pair for multiple instances. There is no problem with that. Okay, so there are now two instances. So one instance should be already running. The other instance is creating right now. Okay. So the thing is, you can start off using your web server once the status checks becomes 2/2. So, or you can just try launching the instance, and if it logins, then you can start off with that. I'll just refresh it once again and check. So both the instances are running. So this is in US East 1A, this is in US East 1B, but both are in the same region, which is North Virginia. Okay. Cool. So right now I'll just open the instance. So to open the instance, you will need the public IP address and you will need PuTTY. So PuTTY is basically a client tool which you can use to log in to the EC2 instances by providing the IP address and providing the port number and providing the private key. So it is basically an emulator which you can use to launch the server. So I'm going to provide the IP address over here. The port number is 22, so that's what we gave in the security group, with this associated with this instance as well as this instance, but we are launching the first instance right now. And then coming down, so over here there is an option called SSH. Under that option there is an sub option called authorization. So you can just click on it, click on browse, and then select your key and open the instance. So once you get this PuTTY security alert, that means your instance is running right now. If not, you will get a network connection timed out error. So just click on yes. If it is an, so right now I launched an Ubuntu server. So for Ubuntu servers, the login username is always Ubuntu. Yeah, so I have logged into my instance. So I'll just clear it. So guys, first it's always a good practice to update your AWS instances. So I'll just update it. Okay, so the instance is updated right now. So let me just check. So there is some problem over there. So that's not an issue. If it is still initializing and your server is working, then it means it's fine. Okay, so right now we'll be installing a simple web server, which is a very lightweight web server called Apache 2. So it's pretty simple to install. If you're using Ubuntu, it's sudo apt-get install Apache 2 and give yes, and the web server is installed. So once you did this, to show you what exactly is this server, so right now we know that we have allowed port number 80. So Apache 2 runs on port number 80. So this Apache 2 server has a default, uh, let's say a default web page already embedded. So the path for that is cd/var/www/html. So inside this you can see an index.html. So inside this, what you can do is you can see the code for the default page. So right now I'll just copy the IP address of the first one. So I'll just change the name a little bit. I'll just name it web server 1 and web server 2. Okay, so I copied the IP address of web server 1 in which there is a web server currently running. And I think you can see the Apache 2 Ubuntu default page. So this is the this is the index.html file over in this particular location. So for example, to make you understand that this particular website is this index.html page, I'll create another web page named as so basically Nano is a text editor. You can use Vim as well. So I'm pretty good with Nano, so I'm just going to use that. So sudo nano 1.html, hit enter, and I'm just going to provide hello world, and I'm going to save it. So now you can see there are two files, index.html and 1.html. So when you refresh it, it'll still go to the index.html page because that is the default location where it searches for. And if I type in 1.html, sorry, 1.html, and now you can see hello world. This is because it is taking you to that particular directory. So this is how Apache 2 web server works. So somebody asked what is Apache? Yeah, it is a web server. So that's what I was explaining. So it is basically a web server in which you can embed a HTML application or a PHP application, whichever you want. So this is how it works, guys, Apache 2. So whenever you install Apache 2, you can go to this particular location, var www/html, and inside that there will be an index.html page. So if you want, so let's say if you want, whenever you type in the IP address, but I think I made a mistake. 5. Sorry. So let's say whenever you type in the IP address, you want a different web page instead of the default page. What you can do is you can just remove. I'll remove this file as well as. So right now there is no file over here in index.html page. So if we refresh this, so there is no there is no file over there, so it's not able to fetch any web page, and it's running on port number 80 as I told you on this particular server. Sorry, let us create an HTML file, index.html again, and I'll be giving this as this is web server 1, and I'm saving this. Done. So now if I refresh this, I should get the index.html page. So I think you are able to see the index.html page over here. So I think you understood how Apache 2 works. Basically, once you install it, in a particular path inside the server, you have the index.html page in which you can embed your own HTML page, which is very simple to start off with. Okay, so we've basically configured our first server. Now let's configure our second server also. So now you can see there is 2 out of 2 checks. Basically, the servers are running fine. Okay, so I'll just close this. And so you can open multiple windows in PuTTY as well. So that's not a problem. So I'm just closing it so that we can concentrate on this. So it's again same because I've used the same key for this web server as well. So even this is Ubuntu. And follow the same steps, guys. So first, update your instance. So once you updated your instance, install Apache 2. So again, it's the same. If I paste this over here, you'll be able to see the default page. So I'm going to do the same thing, guys. I'm going to open the file. So again, you have an index.html page. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to delete this and make it as this is server 2, web server 2. And also I'm going to create a folder over here and embed another HTML page within that folder. So I'll tell you why I'm doing that while doing the ALB demo. Okay, so now I'm going to again remove this, which is sudo rm index.html. So I'm again going to create one, and I'm going to name this as this is web server 2, and done. So I've created. So again, if I refresh, it should take me to web server 2. Now I'm going to create a folder here called let's call it server 2, and you can see I've created a folder here called server 2, and let us enter server 2. So now inside this there are no files. Again, I'm going to create an index.html file within this folder as well. Okay, so now sudo nano, I think you get the process. So I'm going to put this is the subfolder server 2. Yeah, so this is the subfolder server 2. So now if I type in the folder name server 2, I'll get the index.html file within that server. So sorry, within that folder, because within the Apache 2 web server, it always searches for index.html file or index.php file. And once it is in the default place, it takes you to that folder. It takes you to that file. If you have a different folder and inside that again you have an index.html file, and once you give that path, it will take you to that particular web page. Okay, so I think we've set up our instances accordingly. So our instances are good to go right now. So first, let us do a classic load balancer. Once we do a classic load balancer, we will move to the application load balancer to learn more about that. Okay, so first of all, let me click on load balancers, and you can see there are no load balancers right now available in my dashboard. So click on create load balancer. So there are three options, and at the beginning we'll start off with a classic load balancer so it'll be easier to understand. So you can choose anyone, just click on create. Once you click on create, give the load balancer a name. So I'm going to name it as classic lb 1. So I'm just going to name it classic lb1. So here you can see create an internal load balancer. I'm not going to do that. So if I create an internal load balancer, basically only I can access it within my VPC. I'll not be able to access directly from the internet. If I paste the IP address over here, I'll not be, sorry, not the IP, the DNS name or the URL of the load balancer in the browser, I'll not be able to see it. I'll only be able to see the web server within, sorry, the load balancer from within the VPC. So I'm not going to go lot into that because that's again a totally different concept which we'll have to put a lot of time into learn. And coming down, what protocol and what port number should this load balancer concentrate on? Obviously it is HTTP and port number 80, so let it be in default, and we are not going to add any other port protocols or port numbers. So leave it at default and click on next, assign security groups. So you can leave security group at default, you don't need to change anything. And yeah, so there is nothing to add over here because we've already given the security group over to the instances and that will take care. So here if you want to restrict access, then you can create your own security group. For example, somebody asked if we can access through a single IP address. So what you can do is you can just give a custom TCP rule and port number 80, and you can provide your own IP address over here. So whenever you access this particular load balancer from that IP address, only then this load balancer will open, not for the internet. But right now if the source is custom and the side annotation is this, that is every zero, everything is zero, then anyone can access this particular load balancer. So I'm not going to create one, I'm just going to go with the default load balancer. And the default load balancer, again, it just has this one particular rule which is allowing all traffic. Next, so configure security settings. As our load balancer allows all traffic, there is nothing to specify over here. Configure sorry configure health check. So it basically pings to this particular path and checks whether the servers are running. And next, add EC2 instances. So as I told you, classic load balancer will randomly pick up either one of these servers. So I'm going to choose both of these web servers, and coming down, and here you can see availability zone distribution. So there is an instance in the availability zone 1A, and there is an availability zone, sorry, there is an instance in availability zone 1B. So let me just untick this. If we untick this, it won't work because if cross zone load balancing is not available, the classic load balancer will not accept it, and it will not redirect traffic to both of these instances. So always keep it enabled. And then yeah, so that's it, you don't need to enter any other information over here. um, web firewall. So why we are using DNS for load balancer? Because that's what we get, that's what AWS gives us. We can use that. You can associate it with an IP address, there is no problem. uh, Web firewall, yeah, I think you can configure your security group according to your needs. And also there are third-party tools which you can embed with this. Can we create certificate while logging the page? No, certificates I don't think you can create using load balancers. There is a separate tool for that, certificate manager. I think you can use that to create certificates for your application. Okay, so we're going out of the concept over here. Okay, so basically I've added two instances from two different availability zones, and I have connected it to a classic load balancer. Next, add tags. So basically, as I told you, tags does not affect your creation process in any way. This is just to keep track of what you're creating. So I'm not going to add a tag over here because I'm going to create only one load balancer, which is classic. Next, if you want, you can review it once and you can just click on create. And the success load balancer is successfully created. Uh, and coming down, you can see over here there is a DNS name and uh, there is no IP address because they give us only the DNS name which we can use, which is an A record. Okay, so now guys, let's see whether the website is already the instances are already targeted. No, so it will take some time. You can see here the status is 0 out of 2 instances. So basically the load balancer will be creating right now. So once it gets created, then we can use this particular DNS name to view the instances, the web pages inside the instances. So it's still like this. Sometimes it takes some time to load. So the best way to check this is copying the load balancer and pasting it over here. It's still not running, so it will take some time. Let's wait. So I'll just check out the questions if there are any. Denial of service, US. I don't get it. Okay. How to associate public IP to load balancer? So you have a DNS name for this load balancer. You can create a hosted zone with a domain name or an IP address, and you can provide this DNS name over there. So whenever that domain name, for example, intellipaat.com, or the IP address is typed in the web server, it will be redirected to this particular load balancer. Just check if we can create ELB over regions. Okay, can we assign our own DNS name to load balancer name? You can, but not directly. You will have to create an let's say for example there is a service called route 53. You will have to create a hosted zone in route 53. Inside that you can do, how do you get a key? Key in the sense, I think you mean the key pair which we used for which we used for the web servers, and right now it's working, so we'll see that. So how you get key? Yeah, so it's basically you should choose the option create new key, and once you click on that, you will have to provide your key name and click on download key pair, and that's it. It's pretty simple. Refresh once. Yeah, I'll refresh and show you. Cool. So this is right now in web server 1, again in web server 1. Now it is in web server 2, again in web server 1, web server 2. So it's basically random, guys. But if let's see what happens if I type server 2 over here. It's not found because it will not move. So this particular DNS name does not do that. For this particular action, we should use ALB. So that's what I'm going to show you. Okay, so I think you understood classic load balancer. You can have any number of instances. It will still route it randomly like this. So it will take you to a different server every time you refresh. So that's how classic load balancers work. Okay, so we've seen classic load balancers is pretty simple. So we are going to use an ALB right now. So we've done CLB. Now let's do ALB. Now starting off ALB. Again, it's the same process. Click on create load balancer. Click on application load balancer. Provide a name. I'm going to give it as ALB live 1. And scheme, either internet facing, which basically means whether the public can access, or internal, whether you're going to use an VPC. So internet facing, coming down. So again, listeners are HTTP port number 80. Let's say you are having another server with a port number which is different, let's say 400. So you can add a listener, add the protocol, add the port number. Right now we are using only Apache 2, so we are going with port number 80. Coming down, so right now, so this is the default VPC for this particular this particular region. So I'm going to choose 2 availability zones. So the thing is, make sure you are choosing the availability zones in which your instances are. So right now it is showing 4 availability zones. The default number of availability zones which you have to choose are at least 2 availability zones. So right now, guys, I have an instance in US East 1A and US East 1B. So I'm just going to choose these 2 availability zones so that we can reduce the There are no instances in these two availability zones, so there is no point in adding them. So we choose this. So if you do not choose this, and if you choose any other availability zone, the instance under this availability zone will not be taken, so will not be routed using this particular load balancer. So make sure you select all the availability zones which has instances which you want to connect with your application load balancer. I think you understood this part. Give a name, choose the scheme, give the port number and protocol, choose the regions, choose the availability zones. Then, so there is nothing to configure over there because I'm going to use the default security group. Configure routing. So this is where it is different than classic load balancers. In classic load balancers, we directly register the instances with the load balancer. But in ALB, you don't do that. In ALB, what you do is you create target groups. So a target group is basically a group of instances. So when I create a target group, I can associate this target group with a particular instance or a group of instance. So right now I'm going to create two target groups, but while creating an ALB, you can create only one. So I'll show you how it works exactly. So first of all, you'll have to create a target group. So I'm going to give it a name. So this name is going to be web server one target, or yeah, web server one target. So this target group is going to associate with the instance number one, which is web server one. So whenever the load balancer is trying to route traffic to this target group, then it will, so this target group will understand, because this target group will have the instance under it and it will be redirected over there. So it is better understandable while showing it as a demo. So now choose the target type. So it is going to be an instance. You can also choose if you want to just integrate the IP address. So I'm just going to connect the instance directly. So I'm not going to use this. Or if you have a Lambda function, you can use that. I'm not going to go into Lambda. It's a very big concept. Okay. So either choose instance or IP. So if you are using an EC2 server, you can just go with instance. Cool. So now same protocol is HTTP. Port number is 80. Register targets. So I'm not going to register any targets over here. So register targets in the sense connecting an EC2 instance with a particular target group. So I'm not going to connect it over here. I'll show you how to create a target group from scratch in the target group subdivision, and also how to add an instance to it. Next, review, and let's create a application load balancer. So the application load balancer has been created, guys, and it's provisioning in the sense it's still creating. Cool. So now we got the DNS name as well, but if I paste this DNS name, it will not take me anywhere because there is no instances connected with this particular load balancer. So this load balancer is connected to the target groups, not the instances directly. Okay, so right now there will be one target group which we created. So now this target group should be associated with the instance number one. So I'll just open this in another tab. Okay, so web server one target. So this target group should be associated with, sorry guys, internet problems. Yeah, so this target group should be associated with this particular web server. So to do that, just select the target group. So you have multiple options. Click on targets, and you have an option to register targets. So clicking on targets, you have two different instances over here. So I'm going to choose web server one. So I think now you would have understood the point. So the thing is, when you type in the DNS name of the application load balancer in the browser, it will redirect that particular connection to the target group. So now the target group is associated with an instance, so that the target group will redirect it to the instance so that you can see the web page. So this is how the process works. So why a target group, you may ask? Mostly a target group is, you can connect it to directly to one instance or multiple instances, or you can also connect it to an auto scaling group. So we are not going to look into auto scaling. Again, that is a very big concept which we'll have to look into. So I have registered one target with this particular target group. So now let me show you something. So now one target group has been perfectly associated with the application load balancer. So here you can see there is a listener and forwarding the traffic to web server 1 target, and you know which instance this particular target group is associating with. It is web server 1. So now if I type in the DNS name over here, it should take me to web server 1 because I'm associated. So this particular ALB is associated, sorry, just okay. So this particular ALB is associated with the target 1, which is web server 1 target group. So that target group is associated with the web server 1 EC2 instance. So anytime you refresh, it's going to take you to the same server because only one server is associated. Now how to associate the second server to the same load balancer? So this is where it gets like interesting maybe, but it's the same process, guys. So you'll have to create a target group. So I'm going to choose instances because that's what we will be doing, and give a target group name. I'm going to give web server 2 target, same port number, same protocol. I'm not going to change anything else. Then click next. So here it's web server 2. Click on include as pending below and click on create target group. Okay guys, so now we've created two target groups associating different instances. So this is associating with the web server 1 instance, this is web server 2 instance, and you can see here this particular target group is associated with this load balancer, but this particular target group is not. So now the next step is to associate this target group to the load balancer. So now let's go and do that. Okay, so to do that, you'll have to add a listener. You'll have to add a rule to the listener. Now, what I'm going to show you is whenever this particular DNS name is typed directly, it will take you to web server 1. And whenever the DNS name is typed like this, server 2, it should take you to the server 2, which is web server 2, as well as it should not take you to the default page, which will show this is server 1, this is web server 2. It will take you to the what is that, it will take you to the directory within that. So that directory has a index.html file in which it is written as this is the sub folder. I don't remember what exactly I typed. Okay, so it will have a different line than this is web server 2. So we'll see that. So whenever this is typed, it should take over there, but right now it is not associated, so it's not showing. Okay, so right now you already have a listener for port number 80. So basically if you want to add a listener for a different port number in a different instance, even then you can add. That way you can include any number of servers, that's your wish. So you can add a listener for let's say port number 443. You can do that, but right now we are just having this particular web server. Now to add another, so let's say right now there is one particular redirection, which is DNS name to target group to instance number 1. So now we want to add instance number 2. So to do that, click on view and edit rules, view or edit rules. So you can already see default action. So if requests otherwise not routed, if there are no other rules, or if the request is not routed to any other target group, it should directly move that particular connection to target group 1. So now let's add a rule. So to add a rule, click on the plus symbol over here. To edit the rule, you can click on this. Right now let's add a rule. Click on insert rule. So if is path, if the path is server 2, so I already tried this out, so that's why it's showing me the option. You will have to type it out by yourself. So if your path is the DNS name slash server 2 slash, so if this is your path, you should be redirected to the target group number 2, which is associated with the instance number 2, which is this instance. So now if I do this and save this, and that's it pretty much. So just click back, and right now we have done that. Let's see the target groups, and now you can see both the target groups are associated with the load balancer. So now, so as I told you before starting this session, so not before starting the session, while in the middle of the session, so there are two instances. In one there is the blog server, in one there is the tutorial server. Whenever slash blog is typed, you should be taken to the blog server. Whenever slash tutorial is typed, you should be taken to the tutorial server. So that's what is happening here. Whenever the DNS name alone is typed, you should be taken to the server 1. Whenever the path is typed, you should be taken to the subfolder server 2, which is the tutorial page. So guys, this is how application load balancer works basically. Okay, I think we did ALB as well. Okay, so somebody asked me to explain this. So basically, you have two different instances. So what you can do in ALB is you can redirect the requests to a certain target group. So here, if there are no requests to any other part, so here we have given the path as slash server 2. If there are no requests, for example, if I'm just typing the DNS name directly, it will always take me to the target group 1. But whenever I type this path, it will take me to target group 2, because it will check the rules page, and if any rule is true, then it will forward it to that particular target group, and this target group is associated with the instance number 2. So for example, you can see add conditions, you can see source IP as well. You can add a particular source IP whenever that, so whenever and let's say whenever a request is coming from that particular IP address, then it will be redirected to a particular target group. There is HTTP header, there is host header, and then action you can forward to, you can redirect to a particular you can see this, you can redirect to a particular path. Then what else? I've never used this. Okay, so this is basically how to create so add conditions, and if the condition is successful, then it will forward it to a particular target group or a particular IP address. Okay, so I'll just cancel this. Is there any limit to add rules? I think there is a limit, which is I think 1,000 rules. So you can check that out over here. Let me just go over here anyway. Multiple users are using application. If load is high, how can we reduce it? So if the load is high, you will not be able to reduce it. You can use auto scaling to increase the number of servers to handle your application. How do we set up load based routing? uh, so there is a new feature called weight based routing, recently released like around 3 months ago. I think you can mention the percentage. I've not yet tried that, but it's a new feature which is called weight based routing, in which, let's say you have two instances and you want 99% of the requests going to a particular instance, and you want only 1% of the requests going to another instance. You can mention the number, for example, so they've given 1,000, so you can put in 990 and 10, so that 99 requests out of 100 goes to the server number 1. Because again, so I'll just show you how to create the key pair, because many of you have asked for that. uh, okay, so first of all, to do that, you'll have to go to instances. So let me launch new instance so that I can show you how clearly we can create a new for example, a new key pair. So let me just do Ubuntu again. So I'm just going to go through this part. So I'm not going to change anything, guys, because I just want to show you how to do that. I'm not going to include HTTP as well, because I'll not be installing a web server in this. I'll just have to open it and show it to you. Now click on launch. So you'll get this option: select an existing key pair or create a new key pair. Click on this. You will have an option called create a new key pair. Click on it. Now give a name for this. So let me give the name as webinar key pair, and click on download key pair. So the key pair will be downloaded as webinar keypair.pem, but you cannot use the PEM file on the putty, the putty, what is this? Yeah, the putty client. So you will have to use the .ppk file. I'll show you how to create a .ppk file as well. Thank you. Someone told this is a good session. So thank you for your kind words. Okay, so Okay, someone else launched over here. Someone else is also using this demo, guys. Don't get like, yeah. So I don't have any magical powers creating a random instance out of nowhere. So yeah, this is the instance which I am creating. So there is a key pair called webinar key pair dot pem. So right now, guys, so this pem is not compatible with this particular putty. So what we'll have to do is, when you install putty, you will get a software called PuttyGen with it. So open PuttyGen, click on load, and I think I'll just search over here. Sorry, this I'll have to change to all files. Yeah, so now you can see webinar keypair.pem. Open that. So it will regenerate the key so that it is converted to a .ppk format. Now click on save private key, and I'm going to give this key a name, which is again the same name, which is pretty easy, webinar key pair, and it will be saved in a .ppk format and save. So done. So this is how you create a key. Now let me show you the same thing. So right now I'll open this instance with the key pair which I created just now, because that is the key pair associated with this instance. Hostname, port number, same steps, SSH, authentication, browse, and webinar key pair, which is converted to a .ppk file. Hit enter, click on open, and done. So this is how you create a key pair and use it to decrypt your instance and open it. Okay, so we did ALB, we did CLB. So just a second, guys. I'll just check whether my colleague is over here. Yeah, he's there. Okay, so the thing is, guys, we've done this particular demos and we've done the what is this, the theoretical part of load balancers. So there will be new webinars. So right now in this session we saw load balancers. In the future we'll be seeing other services as well. KMS, key management service, yes. Yeah, maybe we'll have a session on that as well. So key management service where you can create keys over there, so you don't need to but the thing is, you cannot create key pairs from KMS. You will have to create key pairs from the options over here itself. I think there will be an option called key pair. Yeah, so over here, so you can also create key pairs from here. My name is Cody. Are these steps of key creation same for people who are using Linux machines? Yes, it is the same for any instance. It is the same. Thank you. This was very refreshing. Thank you. Any difference between if Azure will do the same? I just think the way you create it, then the portal, the website will be different on how you create it, and so there is not any difference. It is a similar kind of service. The working is similar, but the only difference would be how you are going to create it. Azure might have different different spaces you want to enter in. For example, here you enter the target group name, the name of the load balancer. There might be something different, maybe, but nothing else. How can I integrate load balancer to my application? So if you have an application hosted on an EC2 server, then you can do it how I did it. If it is an external server, then you can use the IP address. So there was an option for IP, right? So you can use the IP address of that particular server to associate your application with this particular load balancer. Then do I need networking knowledge for AWS? Yes, a little bit of networking knowledge is very helpful.
Hello everyone, my name is Rahul Sharma. I am a course advisor here at IntelliPath, and I hope the session was pretty good and you had good takeaways from this session. So I'd be helping you out to understand that not only you got a fair idea that how this training is delivered with us. Along with that, I'll also let you know what all things are there with IntelliPath which can help you in shaping up your career. So I would be taking up questions. Do you have any session on SysOps? Yes, Mr. Mohanty. Yeah, definitely we provide SysOps training as well. And one thing that I would like to let all of you know is that in case if you are having any question that you are unable to put forward here, you can also drop me a mail. You can drop a mail to rahul.sharma@intellipaat.com. I'll help you out with all your questions there. Now, speaking about our training on cloud and DevOps. See, we are in this industry since 2011. We have been providing training since then. Currently, we have a learner base of around 6 lakh students all across the world. We are having our presence in more than 53 countries, wherein we provide training for more than 150 courses. And currently, we are providing training not only to individuals, but also we are providing training to MNCs as well. In case if a company has got a project and they want to train their own employees also, we go ahead and we train them also. So the trainings that we have designed, as you have seen, the trainers that we have got, all these trainers are having around 10 to 12 years of industry experience and at least 3 to 4 years of same domain experience they have. And in their own companies, they all are working professionals. In their own companies, they are working as managers, architects, and they are the ones who are basically teaching you guys. So how we design the course, if you ask, so the course curriculum that we set, it has been vetted enough. We have checked how the certifications are, what are the requirements to clear the particular certifications, whether you are applying for AWS, whether you are applying for Azure. So we have created the content accordingly. Along with that, what we believe is, apart from the knowledge that you gain with the sessions that we provide, along with that, practical exposure is also pretty crucial. So for that, we provide you around 3 to 4 real-time industry-oriented projects to help you out to understand whatever you are learning, how you can deploy it in a real-time environment. This basically helps us as well, so as to understand what my learners are going through, what they are learning, what are the areas where they need further improvement. So what we do is, as a training provider, we first of all we go ahead and see your CV. We understand your resume. We understand where you have worked. We also see what are the technologies which can help you. So accordingly, we guide each and every learner. We provide personal attention to all of our learners. So what our course advisors they do is that they understand on what platforms you have worked earlier on and how many years of experience you have, and accordingly they help you out what to learn. And in case if you have a requirement, for example, somebody asked about SysOps, somebody was asking about the next AWS trainings. So accordingly, we go ahead and help you out. The mode of our learning is live. So whenever a teacher is teaching you, you can speak to them, you can ask the questions then and there directly, whatever questions you have. Along with that, so the sessions that generally we have are on Saturdays and Sundays. And the timings are generally from 8 p.m. to 11 p.m. Some of the classes are on weekdays as well. That would be in the morning, 7 a.m. to 9 a.m. Along with it, what we do is, along with the live classes that you attend, it's also pretty important that you are doing your own self-study. And to help you out, what we do is we also provide you e-learning video material, PDFs and PPTs, which help you for your overall improvement. Now, once the training is done, then we start checking, we start going through the projects. What have you done? What have you performed? And again, accordingly, we help you out. In case, for example, some of the areas where you are lagging behind, then again, we'll come and we'll assist you that, okay, these are the things, these are the videos, these are the classes that you can attend again. So that is one good thing with Intellepart is, once, for example, you have taken a training and after some time there are certain upgradations, certain changes in the technology, then again, you can come back to us and take our entire training free of cost all over again. So we also keep on checking in case if some people are lagging on some topics, then we provide them extra classes on that as well. We tell them what videos you need to refer to, what PDFs you need to go through, and accordingly we help them out also. So we have a 24/7 support facility, as I mentioned, since we are there in more than 53 countries around the world. So we are a 24/7 running organization. No matter what time or day it is, you can reach out to us and we'll help you out with all your queries. So this is the support facility that we provide whenever you are doing your self study. We are there to help you out. There is somebody to back you up, and along with that, along with the e-learning material, the support, what also we do is we help you with jobs. As I mentioned, we are providing training not only to individuals but also we are providing training to corporates. Now, the benefit here a learner gets with us is that when we are providing training to corporates, they let us know that we are having so and so requirement in this particular domain, in that particular domain. And accordingly, what we do is we are having our own job portal as well. If you want, you can go and have a look at it as also. It's jobs@intellepart.com. So yeah, jobs.intellepart.com. Herein you can go ahead and see what are the job opportunities available. So what we do is first we train you on the particular technology. We see how you are performing. We check all the projects, all the assignments, and accordingly we help you with your resume preparation also in case if you need that. And then after that we help you with the job placements also. Okay, so now fine, let me see some of the questions. Many questions I can see people have asked. So one question is from Anshika. What could we do after Python? Uh, See, Anshika, a lot of things could be done. Herein, I would be able to give you a better answer if I understand on what platforms you have worked before and what help you need or in which direction you want to go. If you can have a conversation sometime later on, I can help you in a much more personalized manner. A generic idea I can give you is that Python you can learn DevOps also. You can with Python you can go towards data science also. But again, to give you a very personalized answer which can help you out, for that I would be requiring a resume where you have worked, and then I would be able to help you in a better way. You can drop me your resume and we can have a conversation over email also. I've told you my email address is rahul.sharma@intellepart.com. Okay. Do we have any demo sessions? Yes, we keep on continuing, keep on providing demo sessions. We also provide free videos on our YouTube channel. Also, you can go ahead and check that as well. The quality is very, very good. That is what we are providing for free. And when we charge our students, definitely the trainer quality, the quality of videos, everything multiplies. Now, next question we have is, can we configure any auto mail trigger? Okay. Santosh is asking, I'm having experience in networking. Can I go forward to cloud domain? Santosh, you can. And for you also, I would request you to please drop me a mail with a resume. I'll be able to help you in a better manner. Is there any job assistance from Intellepart? Because it's a lockdown right now. So is there any job assistance currently? So this is question from Harshal. Yes, as I mentioned just now, we do provide job assistance. We are having our own job portal wherein we help only, this is only specific to our learners who have enrolled for our classes. For them, we provide this facility and we help you out depending upon how many years of experience you have got and what technology you have learned, what certification you have. Accordingly, we help you out. And yes, I understand it's currently lockdown going on, but still we have got multiple opportunities. Recently, we placed around 20 students in KPMG Chennai. So Sashi is asking, do you help with job placements for students abroad? Yeah, we do that. Sashi, as I mentioned, we are having our presence in more than 53 countries around the world, and recently we provided training to Nasdaq in US. We have provided training to multiple manufacturing companies, also their IT divisions. Also, even we have provided training to telecom giants in Dubai, in UAE. We are providing training in more than 53 countries, as I mentioned. And yes, we have got job requirements also. It depends how your profile is. It depends what technology you have gone through, and accordingly we help our students. So I'm mentioning my email address in case if you are having any question for me, you can drop a mail to me. So talking about the cloud domain, we are providing training on AWS, we are providing training on Azure, we are providing training on DevOps, all the, see, whatever technologies which are there prevailing in the market, we go ahead and we take care of it, and accordingly we create the content which can help you to upskill, not only upskill yourself, but also help you to get a job easily. And that is the sole reason we had to create our own job portal to help our learners in a much more better way. And one more thing, see, the job assistance that we provide, it comes free with the course. We do not charge anything extra for that. It comes free with our training. Now the training fees, it ranges from 22,000 to 50,000 to 1 lakh. It depends on what training you are going ahead with. Also, we have recently launched our courses in collaboration with IIT Guwahati. So that is a well diverse course which takes care of almost all the areas which can help you to gain edge as compared to the other crowd which are there in the market. And herein, the teachers that we have got for some of the faculties from IIT Guwahati itself, they would also be taking the classes. And the training, the entire the curriculum that you see, that also has been designed in collaboration with them. So that content is really amazing. You can drop me a mail. I would be able to provide you much more detail about it. Okay, I have mentioned my email address in the chat box. You can check that. I'm so sorry, I mentioned twice. The first one is wrong. The second one is correct. Okay, so I'm having few more questions. What is the source of job opportunities? As I mentioned, the source of the job opportunities is directly from the company. We are not a consultancy. This is just to help our students, and we provide job opportunities to the people for whom we have already trained their employees. So they believe in our methodology of our training. They believe that once the training is over, our guys would be able to be deployed in the projects directly. They don't need further investment. They don't need further investment of time, no more KTs. They could be deployed in the projects very soon. So that is one of the important factors because of which we have the job sources that we have got. They are these companies directly. When is the next batch starting? Okay, next batch of what, Amit? So, see, actually, we are, as I mentioned, we are providing more than 150 courses. So, talking about cloud and DevOps, this domain, if you ask, every week we are starting a batch. Sometimes we are starting weekday batches, weekend batches, sometimes 3-4 batches in a week. So, every week we are starting a batch. These are one of the top selling courses, and many people are going ahead with it. And that is the sole reason we are having multiple batches. Okay, for how long I will have the access of e-learning videos? Okay, so the e-learning video material that we provide, along with that, what also we do is, for example, right now you just had a session with our trainer. So some of you might want to go back and check what happened in today's class. So that recording also we provide you, plus the e-learning videos that we have created, that also we provide you, and it will be available to you for your entire lifetime. So, for example, if I talk about Azure, so there are multiple changes in Azure. Every year they go ahead and make some changes to it. So whenever there is any change, what we do is we upgrade all the videos that we have got, and we provide the upgraded video to you also free of cost in case in the future if there is any upgradation in that. So all this will be available to you for your entire lifetime. Another question is, will it be taken away after my training is over? No, as I just now mentioned, it won't be taken away. It will be with you, and you can, even after a year or so, if you want to revise, or if you want to again reskill yourself, you can go ahead and you can go through the e-learning material that we have provided. Not only that, you can also join our live classes all over again also if you want. After a year or so, if you want to do it again, you can do that. Is support available all the time? Yes, as I mentioned, we are a 24/7 running organization. Support is available all the time. Okay, I'm having a question. Which technology pays more, Google Cloud or AWS or Azure? Well, if you go ahead and check the market share of all these technologies, you will understand AWS is as big as the next four of its competitors. So definitely the market share is more, which means the number of projects that you are getting in any company is more. So accordingly, see, it's not like it's not the only question that you should be asking, that which technology is paying more. You should also be asking which technology it's easy to get a job also. So there could be a technology which is very rare, but again the projects are also very rare. Definitely it will pay you high, but again it will be very tough to fetch a job in that technology. So herein, if you ask me, so there are multiple questions, there are multiple sub questions which are attached to this question, and that should also be taken care of. Also, it is dependent on the technology that you have worked on before. For example, you are already working with Microsoft technology for a pretty long time, then I would suggest you to go with Azure. If you are very new to cloud domain, I would suggest you to go with AWS or Google Cloud. So accordingly, it depends on your profile also. But again, if you ask me a direct question, I'll say AWS is having the highest market share right now. Most companies are using AWS. Even we are also using AWS. We use Azure also, but AWS is much more easier to use for us. So it depends, company to company, it depends. So again, I would say if you are looking to fetch a job quickly, then that AWS would be a better option for you. If you combine it with DevOps, then definitely that creates a better edge. So as I mentioned, it depends person to person. If you ask me personally, I would be able to guide you in a better manner. My email is not appearing here. I'm using mobile version. Okay. Some of you are unable to write down my email address. I'll tell you guys again. It is rahul.sharma, RAHUL, rahul.sharma, rahul.sharma @intellipaat.com. Okay. One more question is, what is the best discount if I enroll today? Okay. See, if you are interested, yeah, if you're interested to enroll today, I can provide you a better discount of around 30 to 40% depending upon which course you're going for. You can drop me a mail, I will help you with the coupon code there. Also, for a flat discount of 30%, you can use our coupon code U230. You can try this coupon code and you can avail the courses for 30% discount. This is just for today. Also, in case if you are having few more questions, I'm giving you another email address. It is Sailesh@intellipaat.com. He's one of the course advisors here. He's currently heading the cloud domain team, and he can help you in a much more better manner. Sailesh@intellipaat.com. I will also provide you his phone number in case if you want to speak to him directly. I will just give you his number. Hold on. So this is the number. You can write it down: 99164 17685. 99164 17685. You can reach out to him anytime during the day. even you can call him right now. He would be able to help you out. In case if you have any question regarding this session that we had just now, you can speak to him, and he can also guide you depending upon your profile. He can help you out which course to choose. Along with that, in case if you're looking for a better discount, he's the person who can help you out. Also, if you want to get in touch with me, you can drop me a mail on rahul.sharma@intelapart.com.
So thank you guys for attending. So we'll close this session right now. So meet you in the next webinar. Thank you guys.